Hi students, welcome to the BYJU'S Hindu News Analysis for 14th of October 2018. So let's look into the topics that we will be discussing for the day. So kindly look into these topics and these will be the ones that we'll be discussing for the day. So let's get started and look into the first article. The first article speaks about the Flapshell Turtle. So this is very important from the prelims perspective, and all we will have to remember is three important facts. So let's look into those three important facts that can pop up in your prelims examination. So the first important point is the IUCN status. The IUCN status for the Flapshell Turtle is least concern. So what are the countries of occurrence? You can see these in Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, as well as in Myanmar. Another important point that we also have to consider is it is listed under the Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act and is granted the same level of protection as that of the tiger. So kindly remember all these three important facts that can be a prospective question in your prelims examination. So moving on, let's look into the next important article. So the next important article that we are speaking about is in reference to Mitton, which is also called as Gayal, or it has a scientific name called as the Bos frontalis. So what we have to consider in this case is certain important factual data. So what are the factual data that we need to consider? It is the state animal of Arunachal Pradesh. So the Mitton, or which is called as Gayal, the first point we have to remember is it is the state animal of Arunachal Pradesh, and the IUCN status for this animal is vulnerable. So this animal is considered as a descendant of Indian goat or bison because it plays an important role in the socio and the economic and cultural life of certain tribes like the Nishi, the Apatani, the Golo, as well as the Adi in the Arunachal Pradesh. So what is the cultural as well as the socio-economic significance that it speaks about? So when we speak about this animal, that is Mitton, it has its own importance. So what are the important things with reference to this animal? So the first important economic importance is its milk. So what we have to understand in this case is that the Mitton milk that is produced, though less in quantity, is of high quality. So because the milk that is coming from these animals are of high quality, this is the most important point, and this can be used for the preparation of other milk products. And the next important thing that we have to consider is the leather, and the quality of leather coming from these animals is again found to be comparatively superior than the other cattle that you see in this area. And the third important point that we have to consider is in terms of the meat. So this meat is considered to be more tender and comparatively superior than any other meat of other species in this particular region. So what are the three important socio-economic and important things? One is in terms of the milk because of its quality, and then the leather produced is comparatively superior, and the meat that is consumed is comparatively tender in respect to this animal. That is why it is of importance to all these important tribes that are located in this region. And what we also need to consider in this case is that this is also known as the cattle of the mountain. So this is all we have to understand with reference to this article. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article says tribes to the fore in the bastard dialogue. So what is this bastard dialogue? So basically when we are speaking of this, it is nothing but a peace process which is initiated by the tribal leaders, where they have come up together, that is all the stakeholders in this region have come up together and they have passed a resolution, and they have come up with a particular structural framework, and they have finalized one of the roadmaps in order to achieve peace in the region of Dandakaranya. So what is this bastard dialogue all about? So it is one of the peace process which is initiated by certain tribal leaders as well as other stakeholders to bring about a peace process in the red corridor. So what is the term that is important here? What is the red corridor? So when we speak about the red corridor, what we have to understand is it is those regions in India which is highly penetrative of the Naxalistic ideology. So you have the eastern area, then you have the central area, and then what you have is the southern parts of India which is infiltrated by certain ideology ideology, and that is to do with the extreme left-wing ideology of Naxalism, which has certain political inclinations towards Maoism. So what we need to consider is these are the pockets of poorest of the poor regions. This involves certain regions like the Jharkhand, then you have certain regions of Chhattisgarh, then certain regions from Telangana, as well as regions from West Bengal. So these have been one of those regions which is completely impoverished, and they have significant economic inequality, and because they have large scale poverty in this region, that is why there is a mushrooming of a political ideology in the form of Naxalism. What we need to understand structurally is to understand the background. So when we look into the background, what we understand is the fact that this particular idea of Naxalism started grooming in the year 1960s and so on in the area of West Bengal, which is called as Naxalbari. So there is an area called as Naxalbari, and this is in the area of West Bengal, and it is this region that it is taken its name from. So Naxalism as a particular ideology or as a program started way back in the year 1967, that is through the Naxalbari movement, which is one of the regions which is present in West Bengal. So the roots of Naxalism started as an uprising of the peasants in this region. What we have to consider in this case from the background is there are two important points. So what are the two important points? One, the society when you consider in West Bengal was filled with feudal society, and this feudal society had certain landlords, and these landlords are called as the jotedars, and these jotedars had large swathes of land, and it is these people who control large swathes of land, not giving any credit whatsoever to the peasants. And it is this particular act which came up with an uprising which was led by the person called as Charu Majumdar. So what we need to consider in this case is that these oppressive landlords who were called as jotedars were actually owning a large number of lands and did not pay even a penny to these landless laborers or the farmers who worked on their farmlands, and this obviously started leading up to a particular uprising. Why? Because the jotedars tried to manipulate everything that is there under their armory. They manipulated the land records, they deceived the farmers as well as the peasants. They did not pay them any money whatsoever, and this led to what is called as an uprising, which was led by Charu Majumdar. This is on one front where there is high scale of inequality, there is high scale of impoverishment, and there is high scale of poverty, and this is what led to the movement called as Naxalism. This is one of the key important points with reference to the background. But what we will also have to understand is we will have to look at it from the ideological perspective. So what does the ideological perspective speak about? What we have to consider here is we will have to consider two important comments that are being made with reference to this choosing of this particular spot. One of the important points as to why Naxalbari was chosen as the breeding groom of this political ideology according to Prakash Singh. So Prakash Singh is one of the important IPS officers, so he has come up with one of the important clarifications as to why Naxalbari was chosen as one of the ground for this particular political movement. So when you look into this particular spot of Naxalbari, what you see is it is a tri-junction. So it is a tri-junction where people can venture into Nepal, they can go into Bhutan, and they can also venture into Bangladesh. So these Naxalites have a political ideology, that is they want to dethrone the government, they want to set up a revolution, they want to bring about dismantle of the entire democracy. So at this particular moment what you see is that the police going after them. So when you have this political ideology which wants to create instability in the economic system, what you would also have is the democratic institutions which is going to haunt you back. So the Naxalbari as a system tried to create a revolution. It wanted to overthrow the government, and that is when the government created another security personnel, and this security personnel started fighting back this system of Naxalism. But what is important point is that this tri-junctions that you see here, one in the form of Nepal, the other in the form of Bhutan, and then in the form of Bangladesh, started becoming sanctuaries for these people. So they started eluding the police personnel, and also we have discussed that this particular aspect of Naxalism take certain tenets from the Maoism. So what you can also see is China is not very far from this particular area. That is what Prakash Singh says. That is why this particular place is actually chosen. Why? Because these people who are trying to destabilize the system can easily elude the particular police dragnet, and they'll be able to infiltrate in case there is any danger that they actually perceive. And also important point that we have to consider is, we did discuss on the feudal front that this was one of those places which had a large scale oppression, and because it had a large scale agrarian movement with certain political overtones, that is why this place was actually chosen as one of the breeding grounds for the Naxalism movement. So this is important with reference to the background. So what we have to consider in here is that this process of the bastard dialogue is one of the peace process across the red corridor, and the red corridor that we are speaking about is in this region. So it wants to bring about a peace process in the red corridor, and this red corridor consists all those important unequal societies where there is large scale poverty, and they want to bring about with a complete framework, and this framework, what they say is, has to be implemented so that peace can be established in this particular process of red corridor area. This is what the article all about. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article that we are speaking about is in terms of the cultural aspect from the GS paper 1, and there are two important points that we have to consider from the prelims perspective. One is Sri Digambar Jal Lal Mandir. So there are two important facts that we have to consider with respect to the Sri Digambar Jain Lal Mandir. One, it is the oldest and the best known Jain temple in Delhi, and the second important point is the temple was constructed during the reign of the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan. And the next important point also from the prelims perspective that we have to consider is about the Naya Jain Mandir. So there are two important temples. One is in reference to the Digambar Jain Lal Mandir, the other is in terms of the Naya Jain Mandir. So what we have to consider in this case is, this temple of Naya Jain Mandir was constructed by Raja Harsukh Rai, and Raja Harsukh Rai was a treasurer in the late Mughal period who constructed a large and an ornate Jain temple in the year. So how was he able to construct it? So he had to get the permission from the Mughal king, and after getting the royal permission from the king, what he went about was the construction of a shikara, and this shikara for the temple was for the first time constructed during the Mughal period. So this temple is called as Naya Mandir, or what is called as new temple. Why? Because there was already a presence of another temple, and that is the Jain Lal Mandir. So because we already had the presence of another temple, that is the Jain Lal Mandir, that is why this temple is called as the new temple or Naya Mandir. So these are important with respect to your prelims examination. Also, one of the important facts that we have to understand with reference to this article is what it speaks about the Bongya. So what are these bonyaras? So these are basically nothing but underground chambers constructed in the Jain temple. Why? Because in case they sense there is any disturbance, or there could be a plunder, or there could be harm to the temple, what they used to do was they used to save all the important sacred idols in the underground chambers. So basically this underground chambers was one of the important customs that these temples came up with. Why? In order to make sure that all the sacred idols that are there in this particular temple are actually saved away from the plunder. That's the main reason as to why this particular program was conducted. So this is all we have to understand with reference to this article. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article here speaks about the Chandra Telescope. So there are three important dimensions from the exams perspective. One, we understand what is a Chandra telescope, and next we understand what is its uniqueness, and then we understand what is the problem area that has been reflected in this article. So the first important point that we have to consider here is, what is this Chandra telescope? So this one of the important prelims factors that it is constructed by NASA. This can be a likely question in your prelims examination. So this Chandra telescope that you see here is one of of the important things in order to understand and detect the X-ray emission. And where does it detect these X-ray emissions? So this Chandra telescope is able to detect all the X-ray emissions in the very hot regions of the universe. This will involve the clusters of the galaxies or the exploded stars, or for example the black holes or the quasars or the supernova. So what this particular Chandra telescope would be able to do is it will be able to detect the X-ray emissions from all these high energy systems that are there in the universe. So basically what it goes about doing is it understands all the X-ray that is being emerged from this particular high energy systems. And this Chandra was launched in the year 1999, and it is well beyond the original design lifetime of 5 years. So initially when it was designed, it was for a period of about 1999 to the year 2004, but with time what NASA has made about structural changes, and it has extended it to more than 10 years, and currently what you see is about it is more than 18 years that it has been operating. So this telescope is named after one of the Nobel Prize winning Indian American astrophysicist, and that is Subramanya Chandrasekhar. So what is the uniqueness of this NASA Chandra telescope is the next question. So what is the most unique important aspect of this Chandra telescope is you have the number of Earth telescopes which are there on the ground, but these are not able to identify or extract information with reference to the X-rays. But what this Chandra telescope basically goes on to do is they are able to understand the X-ray, that is they are able to detect X-ray sources about 100 times fainter than any previous X-ray telescope, which is not capable by any other telescope. They are able to detect it at a very minuscule level, and that is why it becomes a very important aspect, and that is its uniqueness. So what is the point of concern? So the point of concern is that there is certain technical glitches in the gyroscope. So what is a gyroscope? A gyroscope basically is one which involves the satellite in the orientation. So it is this gyroscope which fundamentally helps in sustaining the momentum as well as maintaining the orientation of the satellite, so that it is able to capture the X-ray from all the high energy sources like the black hole as well as the quasars as well as the other important universal galaxies. So the main aspect of gyroscope is it helps in sustaining the orientation of the satellite. But what we also see is one of the important word, and that is called as the safe mode. So what is the safe mode that it is speaking about? So we did realize that there was one of the technical glitches, and the telescope that was supposed to function normally is not working normally. So when we have an abnormal or the disruption or technical glitch, what we make sure is called as the safe mode. So what is the safe mode basically? So the safe mode basically is the normal productivity of that satellite is temporarily suspended, and this temporarily suspension is for the stable configuration. So what you need to make sure is you need to provide certain safe configuration in order to make sure that the normal mode is completely disrupted, and then you make sure that there are certain safe configurations that you go about with respect to the satellite from the ground station. That is called as the safe mode. So what happens in this particular case is there are certain important critical hardware. So all this critical hardware will take a backup of all the data. So a backup of all the data is taken up in this particular case. So what is the safe mode all about? So the safe mode is all about bringing about a stable configuration until the ground control can take corrective measures so that it goes back to the normal mode. This is what we need to understand from this article. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article speaks in reference to the Ram Leela. So this is important from the cultural aspect, GS paper 1. So let's look into some of the factual data. So it is the performance of the Ramayana epic, and this personally means when you break it down, Ram as well as Leela, you have two words which basically means it is Ram's play. So this is performed across the northern India during the festival of Dussehra, and this is enacted in places like Ayodhya, Ramnagar, Benares, Vrindavan, Almora, Satna as well as Madhubani. So this staging of Ramayana is based on Ramcharitamanas. So this Ramcharitamanas was written by one of the important pioneers of the Bhakti movement, and that is Tulsidas, and this is one of the most important storytelling forms in the northern country. So this Ram Leela festival festivities were declared by the UNESCO as one of the intangible cultural heritage of the humanity in 2008. But what is the significance of this moment? So when we consider the significant aspect, what happens during this participation of Ramlila is you have all sects of people coming up and participating in this particular moment. So without any distinction of the caste, without any distinction of the religion, without distinction of age, all sects of people come up and participate in this particular movement of Ramlila. So all this is what we have to understand from the prelims examination perspective, and this is all we have to know. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article here speaks about the Bengaluru lake. So what we have to understand is Bangalore is known as the IT capital. Bangalore is known as the Silicon Valley. It is also known as the Garden City of India. But what is the major problem is? The major problem is with reference to the pollution in reference to one of the important lakes, and that is the Bellanduru lake. And it strike prominence when this particular river had a large scale toxic froth that you see as in the picture. And also what happened during this period was the lake in this case also caught fire. So what we will be discussing in this case is what is this issue all about. For this we will have to head back to the background. During the period of 1960s and 70s, this lake that we are presently considering, the Bellanduru lake, was one of the most important lakes for this particular region. So there were number of people who used the water of this lake for the agricultural productivity. So they used this lake water for production of paddy, they used it for production of certain other vegetables like cauliflower, the tomatoes, and all other important parameters for the agricultural users. This river, when it was also Hindi, was one of the important areas for the fishing. There were almost about 600 to 700 families in the neighborhood which completely relied on the fishing, and they made a living out of fishing. And this was one of the important aspects, and the most important aspects was there was one of the cultural festival that was happening in this area, and that is called as the Tepotsava. So Tepotsava basically means it is a local festival in the form of boat races. So what you see in the background of this particular lake is that it was a healthy river where there was agricultural practices. This was one of the livelihood means for number of families in terms of fishing. And also what we see is a Tepotsava, which is one of the boat festivals that was happening in this area. But what is the issue right now? So when we look into the issue aspect, what we consider is there are two important issues that is striking this particular lake. So what are the two important issues? One is we consider what is the formation of the foam. The other is the consideration of the fire. So the two important aspects that we'll be considering, first is the formation of the foam. How does the formation of the foam take place in this case? So what is happening in this case is majority of the times the foam formation happens during the monsoon season. So during the monsoon season, what you have is a large scale rainwater. So you have large volumes of rainwater which is getting mixed with the untreated sewage water. So we know for the fact that the sewage water consists of ammonia as well as phosphate. So this intermixing of the rainwater along with the untreated sewage water creates what is called as the foam, and that is the creation of the foam in this particular case. And the other important point is the fire. What happens in this particular case is that the cooking oil that is thrown by the households enter into this particular lake, and also the mixture of ammonia and phosphate that is treated by the untreated sewage water again mixes up, and this is the cause of fire in this particular lake. So because of the lack of treatment plants, because of the industrial waste, and because of all these small factories that are located in this region dumping all their disposal into this lake, this has become a breeding ground of foam as well as fire. So what are the problems? So when you look into the problems, what you see is there is a large scale problems in this particular area. So because there is penetration of all these harmful chemicals, there is pollution of the groundwater. So what was edible, what was once the platform for agriculture, irrigation, as well as fishing, as well as the Tepotsava festival is now polluted because of the presence of the dumping yard of all the industrial waste. And apart from this, there is large scale disappearance of the fishes in this particular case, and also the froth that we just discussed also irritates the skin. So these are the major problems which we see with respect to the Bengaluru lake. So what is the major problem? What is the institutional problem? So when we look into the institutional aspect, what we have to consider in this particular case is that there are number of institutional mechanisms that is actually meddling with each other. So what do we mean by it? Let's say for example you have the BDA. So the BDA here stands for the Bangalore Developmental Authority. So it is the BDA which is the present custodian of the lake, and it is the BDA which is supposed to rejuvenate the lake. But what is the point of conflict is that the BDA says there is another institution by the name BWSSB. So the BWSSB stands here for the Bengaluru Water Supply as well as the Sewage Board. So what the BDA goes about saying is, we are ready to rejuvenate this particular lake. We are ready to also clean up this particular lake. We are ready to take up the responsibility of cleaning the lake. But what is the problem? The problem is all the untreated sewage enters this particular lake, and who is responsible for this? It is the BWSSB which is responsible for treating the sewage. So we can bring about the change, we can bring about all the structural regulations with respect to the lake, but when the BWSSB is not ready to clean its sewage, and when it is letting the untreated water enter into the lake, how can we bring about the change is what the BDA asks in this particular case. So the BDA goes about saying all the restoration, in case we go about bringing it, it will be a very futile exercise. Why? Because the sewage water still continues to enter the lake, and that is why we are not cleaning this particular lake is what the BDA goes about speaking. And also what the BDA also has to understand is, BDA is also supposed to be blamed. Why? Because the government in the past has given certain finances. So all these finances that were given to the BDA was to make sure that there is fencing around this particular area. But what has happened in this case? The BDA has not taken the responsibility. No, because there is no fencing that has taken place in and around that particular area, what you see is a large scale encroachment, and these encroachments is in the form of industrial outfits taking up, and that is the major cause of disturbance. Also what we have to consider in this particular case is, people are also responsible for it. All the apartments that you see in and around are letting the sewage into this particular lake. They are not treating this particular sewage. They are leaving their sewage into the storm water drain which are entering the lake area. So all in all, what you see is the institutional problem as well as the ethical problem with respect to the people. So the people who are supposed to take the responsibility of not letting the untreated sewage are not taking the responsibility, and the BDA as well as the BWSSB, which were supposed to clean and cleanse the system, are not even cleaning the system. That is the major flaw, and that is why we need to bring about certain changes. So what are the changes that we are speaking about? So there were in number of cases in the past, there were certain changes that were suggested. So what the government needs to currently do is bring about these changes when it comes to the Bengaluru lake. So what is important from the institutional perspective is, currently you have different institutions, say for example the BDA or for example the BWSSB. So what we will have to consider here is that you need an integrated approach. So what do we mean by integrated approach here? So you have the BBMP, you have the BDA, you have the BWSSB. Each institution has its own set of organization rules. So what we currently need is, all these organizations need to come up together and they need to have an integrated plan so that they are able to come up with the rejuvenation program. And apart from this, there was one of the reports that was released by the IASC. So after looking into what are the various provisions that they would be able to change with respect to the lake, what the IASC has actually changed is, it has come about with two proposals. So what it has suggested is, instead of coming up with all different institutional mechanisms, instead of coming up and having different organizations for the lake, what we can do is we can have a single organization. So have a single organization organization which is completely taking care of this lake, is what the IASC says. And apart from this, what it further goes on to say is that there needs to be a 30-meter buffer zone, and this 30-meter buffer zone should be in such a way that it prevents any sort of encroachment. So the IASC has gone about giving two suggestions. One is we need a single organization, and there needs to be a demarcation along the lake, that is there needs to be a buffer zone of about 30 meters where there is no encroachment that it takes about. And apart from this, what we also see is one of the important reports, and that is to do with the Patil committee. So this Patil committee, which was appointed by the High Court in the year 2011, goes about suggesting certain things, where it says first thing that you will have to do is you will have to conduct a survey as to who has encroached this land, where are the regions that this restoration has to start off from, and where is the sewage water entering. So first make sure that you are doing a survey, and this will involve the encroachment part, this will encroach the industrial part as well as the disposal part. So after you're doing a particular survey, what you need to do is you need to go about with the removal of the encroachments. So in case you see any of the industrial outfits which has encroached this particular area, first make sure that this encroachment area is taken back by the government. Then you settle all the litigations in case there is anything that is possibly arising because of it. And finally what it says is take all the technical approvals that is required from the central government as well as the state government, so that there is restoration work that is taken place, is what the Patil committee has gone about recommending. So what we have to consider in this particular case is a comprehensive view of this particular article. One, from the background, then with reference to the issue area, what this can lead to, or the number of problems, then what are the fundamental institutional problems, and how is that we would be able to bring about changes. So this will comprehensively cover this article. So moving on, let's look into the next one, and this is to do with the Annapurna Devi. So what we have to consider in this particular case is Annapurna Devi was born in Maihar, that is in Madhya Pradesh, to Ustad Baba Alauddin as well as Madina Begum in the year 1927. So why are we discussing this? Because one of the important Gharanas, that is Mahira Gharana, was actually propagated, or one of the pioneers of this particular Gharana was Alauddin. So who is Alauddin? Alauddin is the father of Annapurna Devi. So what we have to consider is, let's understand certain important facts with our Annapurna Devi, and then also look into the Mahir Gharana. So one of the important factual data that we need to consider is that she was born in the year 1927 to the parents of Alauddin Khan as well as Madina Begum, and this Alauddin Khan was working in princely states, and this princely state is the princely state of Maihar in the region of Madhya Pradesh. So there was one of the kings in that particular area. So it is Maharaja Brijanath Singh who went about naming Annapurna Devi. So this is what we need to understand about the naming. So what is also important is she was awarded the Padma Bhushan in the year 1977 and Sangeet Natak Academy in 1991, and the Sangeet Natak Academy appointed her as the prestigious Ratna Fellow in the year 2004. But what is important from the prelims perspective is we also need to understand the important point, and that is to do with the Mahir Gharana. So first important point that we have to understand is what is a Gharana. So when we say the Gharana, what it basically goes on to say is it is a particular style of the Hindustani classic music. So this word Gharana, which comes from the Hindi word which is also called as Gar, which is taken from Sanskrit, basically means Griha, which means a house where you have all the people who are practicing this particular Gharana. Gharana basically means you have a particular style of adherence to a particular music system. So this Mahira Gharana belongs to the Hindustani classic music, and this basically was proposed, and one of the important founders of this was Alauddin Khan, who is the father of Annapurna Devi. So this Gharana can be seen in the areas of northern India. So this school was formed by Alauddin Khan in the princely states of Maihar, which is currently there in Madhya Pradesh, and Alauddin Khan learnt this particular style and he proposed this particular style, and that is why it becomes a very important point from the prelims examination perspective. So this entire article, which is to do with the ILFS as well as its rescue, it is one of the most important article, but this video will be uploaded on one of the important economic weekly discussions, and you will get to know know everything about the background as well. On, let's look into the prelims practice questions. So the New START treaty was in news. What is this treaty all about? So kindly look into the question, pause and then answer, and then look into the answer. So the answer for this particular one is, it is a bilateral strategic nuclear arms reduction treaty between the USA and the Russian Federation. So the Doctors Without Borders, often in the news, is a non-governmental international organization. So these are the important previous year question papers that we have discussed. So moving on, let's look into the mains practice question. It says, throw light on the significance of the thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi in the present times, and why is Indian regional national navigational system needed? How does it help in navigation? So kindly write all your answers on the comment section so that we can look into your answers, and also do a peer review. In case you feel one of the answers is good, please like that particular comment so that it comes up in the comment section. So this is it for today. Thank you so much. All the best.